Hi, I'm Maren and welcome back to my channel, Maren Makes It. Today's video is going to be about one of the first stops I had when I moved out of my apartment and decided to travel full-time. My Carlsbad Caverns video was kind of a test trip for me to see if I would like traveling while working, and posting that video was kind of a test to see if anybody wanted to hear about my travels, but that video seemed to get a pretty good reaction, so I figured I'd make another one about another cool place on my trip, and that is going to be Capulin Volcano National Monument. Anyways, so I decided to move out of my apartment, and there was a lot that went into this decision. Like, this could be a whole nother video on its own because there was so much to consider when making this choice. And at the end of the day, I moved all my stuff into a storage unit, and then I stayed in Santa Fe to get some doctor's appointments done. So I ended up couch surfing for about 10 days in Santa Fe before I actually left New Mexico on my trip. This was actually a great trial period because it was basically like I was getting to do what I would do in later parts of the trip, but in a city that I was comfortable in and the city where my storage unit was. So if I did forget anything, or if I was like, oh shoot, I wish I would have packed that, I could still go to the storage unit and get it. So it was kind of a great trial run to see what it would be like couch surfing in places that I didn't know very well. This also gave me a little bit of time to prepare my car for traveling, so I wanted to get an oil change done, just get the brakes checked and everything. I also wanted to change out the rubber tubing on the doors of my car. So my car, when it drives on the highway, because it's old and the tubing's old, like, it sounds like there's constantly a window open. It's really loud. Old cars are already really loud on the highway compared to newer ones. I recently learned this because I had a rental car and the car was so quiet that I actually couldn't tell that it was on. I actually left it running in the parking lot of Starbucks while I went to run in to get a coffee because I literally couldn't tell that the car was on because it sounded the same as when it's off to me, as somebody who drives a car where normally it's so loud that you can't really forget that it's on. So I wanted to see if maybe changing out the tubing in the door, because it was starting to kind of like break. It was really squished down from just being an old car. So I thought maybe if I replace that tubing, it will make my car quieter. I looked up the official like Toyota replacements for those door tubes and it was $70 per door. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that for a rubber tube. So I found like a knockoff version on Amazon, which I'll link in the comments down below. But it wasn't a perfect fit, but luckily my friend's boyfriend helped me install it on the doors. I was already ready to send it back because I couldn't figure out how to make it work. In the end, it was a success and the car was a lot quieter. It finally sounded like the windows are closed. Woo! Anyway, sometimes I think it's the little things that make all the difference, such as changing out this rubber tubing. Another trip preparation I made was getting some Bluetooth speakers. So these are not car-specific speakers at all. They are rechargeable. I can charge them in the cigarette lighter of the car while I'm driving, or you can just, bring them in somewhere with you. The thing is, my car was born in that unfortunate generation, let's call it the CD generation, where there's not yet any kind of Bluetooth connection to the car speakers, but it's also not so old that it has a cassette player in it so that you can connect your phone to the car that way with like an aux cord. So all I have is a CD player. So unfortunately, the only way to listen to your phone in the car is to transmit it over the radio. So you have to have something that plugs into the cigarette lighter that then you can put to an empty radio station, and then you have to turn the radio on and pick an empty radio station, and then you can broadcast your phone that way. The problem is, if you're driving long distance, well, you might be driving into a different city and what radio station is empty ends up changing on you, and then you're stuck adjusting this as you're driving. And if you're counting on your phone for your GPS directions, then you can't hear the GPS directions when the radio station changes. Oftentimes that happens when you're entering into cities, and that's where the most directions are, where you might have to change highways. Especially in cities, sometimes it's really hard to find an empty radio station at all. I know growing up outside of New York City, I had to do this because I had my same car. Little Red and I go all the way back to when I was first learning to drive. I know, like, driving in that big of a city area, it's almost impossible to find an empty radio station sometimes. The stress of having to change both of those dials quickly enough to find an empty radio station so that you don't miss any directions and still keep your eyes on the road just is something that I didn't want to deal with. And so I would just switch to the Bluetooth speakers in these situations, and that way I just knew that I had a consistent way to keep playing music. Anyways, being in Santa Fe for a bit before leaving really gave me a chance to pack the car, notice if I was missing anything, and feel like I was fully prepared going into my trip. So the first place I headed from New Mexico was Colorado, and this is like the world's easiest drive to Denver. You get on I-25 in Santa Fe, and then the GPS goes, continue straight for 384 miles, and you're just kind of cruising until whatever exit you want to get off in Denver. But I decided to stop along the way on something that I thought would break up the drive nicely, and also a place that has kind of intrigued me for a long time. It's about 3 hours away from Santa Fe, so it's like a little bit annoyingly long for a day trip normally. So we are going to explore Capulin Volcano National Monument. It's about halfway between Santa Fe and Denver, and it's only really a minor detour off the highway. It is going to be in the northeastern corner of New Mexico. I'll put a map in here. This is kind of a funny volcano because it looks like the volcano that a kid draws, honestly, because it looks like somebody just plopped it onto the horizon. Like, a lot of volcanoes, I feel like, are part of a mountain range and they just kind of look like a regular mountain, but this one looked like a cartoon volcano, so I'm so excited to go there because I feel like this is just going to be really fun. Also, you can see this volcano from like an hour away. Like, it's like the only thing on the horizon. So it's really fun as you're driving up to it. So me editing this got curious just how far away this picture was taken from. So I went to the information on iPhone to see where the location was tagged. Then I pulled up an online calculator that calculates the distance between places, both for driving and also as the crow flies. So directly that line of sight that you would see. So you can see that you're seeing it from almost 60 miles away, and it will take you 98 miles to actually get there driving. So it literally is hours away that you can see this thing from. Also, by the way, other than a few gas stations, there's like really not much in terms of amenities near here. So there's like 1 or 2 gas stations when you first get off the exit to go here. And then there's the visitor center. But other than that, there's like really not much. So just keep that in mind for your planning purposes. So when you leave the visitor center, you basically drive up like a spiral staircase around the outside of the volcano to get up to the top, where there's a little parking lot, and then you can do some walking from there and exploring on foot. This road is definitely a little bit treacherous. It doesn't allow RVs or like vehicles over a certain length because the road is so steep, and in certain parts it's so washed out, which is a little alarming to see. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's so washed out, the road, that you can only go one way. So like you have to take turns, like traffic going in this direction and then in this direction while the other direction waits, because there's like just it looks like just a mudslide and the rest of the road got washed down the mountain side while you're driving up there. So maybe if you're afraid of heights, this is not the place to go. There's a few smaller trails that start from the visitor center, but the main attraction here is going to be the rim trail that starts from this top upper parking lot that you have to drive up to and goes around the top edge of the volcano. There's only like 20 parking spots, like literally 20 parking spots at the top of the volcano. So the people in the visitor center warned me that if you come in the summer or on a particularly good weather day, especially on a weekend, you want to get here early when they open, because otherwise they have to count the vehicles and you might get stuck waiting at the park entrance and not being allowed to drive up until somebody comes down. They said it definitely gets backed up, and sometimes on the weekend it could be like 45 minutes or an hour of waiting just in order to get a parking spot up there. The first day I came, the weather was really cloudy and there was nothing close to a line. It was a weekday, I think. Also, I ended up liking it so much that I actually wanted to come back on a clear weather day just to see what that would look like. That's why I have footage of 2 completely different weather days here that I'm going to kind of mesh together to try to give you guys a good idea of what it's like up there. a clear weather day, you can actually see 5 states from up here, which how freaking cool is that? I've been to the Four Corners area, which is in the other northern corner of New Mexico, but up here it's 5 states and not just 4. I don't know anywhere else in the US where this is possible. I feel like maybe somewhere in New England because the states are small, but I grew up in Connecticut and I still can't think of anywhere where this would be possible. But if you guys know of anywhere, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be very curious to hear where that is. The reason you can see so far from up here is because we're about 1,300 feet above the surrounding plateaus.
Here we can actually see the trail that goes into the bottom of the center of the volcano, and this is the view when you walk down into that center spot.
The first day I visited here, it was unusually cloudy for New Mexico. I feel like it looked more like Ireland or like maybe like New Zealand. I don't know, not that I've been to those places, but I feel like what pictures of those places look like. The second day is the one where it was more clear skies, but I think it's really cool to see this place in 2 completely different lightings under 2 completely different situations about a week apart. The second time I noticed something strange. So as I approached some of the trees, I saw all this like red stuff on the trees. My first thought was, oh my gosh, it's berries. Like some kind of berries must be growing up here. How cool. And then I was like, wait, they're growing on the bark. That can't be berries. So then I thought, okay, maybe it's some kind of like fungus. But I was like really alarmed because I'd just been there a week ago and there hadn't been anything like this on the trees. Well, as I got closer, I actually realized it was ladybugs. Like clusters and clusters, like handfuls of ladybugs. Like you could have scooped these guys up. It was wild. It also kind of felt like a sign that I was meant to come back to this place because my nickname as a kid was actually Ladybug, because the German word for ladybug is similar to the German pronunciation of my name. So in German, you'd pronounce my name Maren instead of Maren. And in German, the word for ladybug is a Marienkäfer. So my family called me a Marienkäfer when I was little, like a Maren bug kind of. And I actually collected ladybug things my whole life growing up. If I can find a picture of that, I'll try to put that in here. But anyway, it kind of felt like a sign that I was meant to come back to this place. Aside from the ladybugs, the walk around the top of the volcano is about a mile. There's some really steep sections though, and you're also at quite a high altitude. So you're at over 8,000 feet here. So if you're not used to living at altitude and acclimatized to that, you can definitely be out of breath up here. I was coming back from a foot injury at this point, and so it was honestly a really big deal for me to just be able to walk a mile without that much pain. You pretty much have like 360 vistas the entire time in all directions. You can also see the lava flows from the last eruption of this volcano from up here. You can see them from Google Earth and also in my photos. The last eruption of this volcano was 60,000 years ago, which sounds really long ago, but it's actually relatively recent for geological time. Anyways, after leaving Capulin, I still have 3 hours of driving to do till Denver, so I am going to keep my eyes on the road and finish that drive off. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Bye, YouTube!